Today's tutorial is not for a pattern. This is for just a bag that I make that I kind of designed or came up with out of a need to have storage for my templates. Disclaimer, if this bag resembles any patterns out there, I am not stealing a pattern and I did not know about it. I'm just making bags that help me. I'll give you the measurements, but honestly, I make this different every time I make one because it is for acrylic template storage or even pattern pieces sometimes if I don't buy the templates. So for example, if I have a large template, I'll make it bigger. If it's a smaller template, it'll be a smaller. I have all sizes of these in my sewing room. I hang them up on hooks by the straps, and then whenever I want to make a bag with it, I'll just start putting in the fabric, the zippers, the hardware, anything else that I need just to get it ready to go. And when I'm ready to sew it, I'll grab it and start working on it. Or if I'm like say going to my kid's house and just going to spend the day there, I'll grab it and take it with me so I can do a little bit of work while I'm outside the home and just hanging out with family. So it's just a convenient way for me to keep things stored, but also for me to be organized. For today's version, I'm using a cotton woven and I already attached it to a fusible foam. My print is from the Emporium and the webbing is also from them. It matches perfectly and I'm in love with it. She did do a pre-order on this and had some retail. It sold out immediately, and so she's doing another flash pre-order and it closes on the 11th. She has the webbing available right now for retail, but the print pre-order for it. This will be my exterior piece. I have two of these. I have them cut out and I think it's about a 14 by 14 inch square. Like I said, it doesn't matter what size, square, rectangular, how big, how small. It's really up to your own preference on that and what you need it for. I have two pieces of webbing clipped on. You can just see I have a strap hanging there at the end. So that'll be what I used to carry it or what I used to hang it with. And I have my straps 3 inches in from each side. And this webbing is probably about 35 to 40 inches long, and you can choose just how much you want of a strap, like how big. I usually don't put this on my shoulder, but it is big enough for me to put on my shoulder. But if you wanted it smaller to save some on your webbing, you could definitely do it smaller because really it's just going to be a bag you're carrying. So the first thing I do is put the straps on there, make sure I don't twist them, and then I just stitch them across. Today I'm going to use a rivet on there, so I pulled out some rivets, and after I sew it, I'll put a rivet at the top, just one on each, so 4 rivets in total, just for looks basically. You don't need it for security because you're going to sew up one side 1/8 of an inch away, go across, and then come back down. As far as where I'll stop sewing, it'll be about 2.5 inches from the top, and I'll just sew across. Again, don't be stressed over anything. What I try to do instead of worrying so much about the measurements is make sure that it looks even. That's why I have these clips here. So I'll just kind of eyeball, and when I get up to this spot, then I'll cross over. If you feel uncomfortable with that, you can mark it with chalk as to where you will cross and stitch across there and come back down the other side. I am going to sew all 4 of these straps just 1/8 of an inch away off camera. When I come back, I'm also going to have added a tag from Heartwood and Hide. I'll add the rivet and I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll go on to the next step. I have sewn down all 4 sides of the strap and I added a tag here in the middle. The next thing we need to do for the exterior will actually be the last thing we're doing until we're at the very end. What I'll do is I'll put the 2 exteriors right sides together and sew along the bottom edge. Now if you've measured everything correctly, these should match perfectly and your webbing should be perfect, but if not, just match along and then trim up as you can. My favorite seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch, but on this where I have some webbing here, I want to take a little bit bigger of a seam allowance, so that way I can make sure I get the webbing caught really well so I don't have any risk of unraveling. And I want to top stitch the seam open. I want to butterfly that seam. So instead of doing 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to do 3/8 of an inch just to make sure I get a really good connecting stitch here. So I'll definitely backstitch when I start and stop and just go a 3/8 of an inch seam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open this up and I'm going to top stitch the seam on both sides. This is the way I like to do it just because I feel like it's a little bit easier and you have a really good solid strap. But if you don't like it this way, you could always just attach your straps at the top. I've made them like that before too, if I don't want to waste the webbing or if I'm running kind of low on the webbing I want to use. So you can see I'm sewing it from the wrong side. I'm opening up my seam and I'm just going to do 1/8 of an inch on both sides of that seam I just sewed. This is just tacking down the seam allowance, and it's going to help it to not only lay better whenever we add the lining, but it's also going to help make sure that the webbing gets another layer of stitching just for more security there. I sewed down one seam. I'm just going to come across the bottom to sew down the other side of that seam instead of breaking the stitches and moving it around. This is the way the seam looks. I'm going to go ahead and sew down one more time now, 1/8 of an inch away from the stitches I just did, to have another layer of stitching just to secure that seam down where it's foam and it's wanting to stick up. This is unnecessary, but I just like to do it this way so that I have a really nice flat finish. So there's no issues with the lining kind of being bumpy or anything like that whenever I attach it on here. Again, flip it and just sew across there, stitch down the other side. So that is my exterior. It's completely done until we add everything at the end. So I'm going to set this aside and we're going to start working on the lining. The inside of this bag is going to have 2 clear vinyl zipper pockets, which also serve as a slip pocket as well. So what I'm going to do is I have my 2 pieces of clear vinyl cut out. I cut them a little bit larger than my exterior just so I have some wiggle room. And then as far as the size go, it doesn't really matter how tall. You definitely want a gap in the center where that fold is. You don't want them up against each other because that would just make it really bulky and everything. But for mine, you know, with that 14 by 14 inch square, my clear vinyl is actually 9 inches. But then whenever I add the zipper tape and the binding, it'll be a little bit bigger than that. So let's say it'll be closer to even 11 maybe. Then we still have plenty of room in the center of that, so you could even go up bigger if you wanted. Honestly, it even depends on what your vinyl is. If you have a roll of 12-inch vinyl, make sure you cut it big enough so that you don't have to trim it down or lose any of that way. Just make it work for you. So let's work with one of these pieces at a time. I also have 2 zipper tapes. My zipper tape is from Mormino. You can get it on the website. And then I just cut some of the fabric that I'm using for that exterior down into strips. My strips are 2.5 inches and I did a 4-way fold on them. So I'm going to go ahead and clip one of the binding strips onto my clear vinyl. And I don't have this interfaced with anything. I am just slipping it in there all the way. And I'm going to make sure that that clear vinyl is all the way up against that edge and it fits really nicely. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to top stitch all along the bottom of this just 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to top stitch all the way from one side to the other, back stitching before I stop. Back stitching when I start and stop. Then I will come back and I'm just going to lay the zipper tape underneath. I have my zipper tape cut a little bit longer too because I don't have a pull on it, and having it a little bit longer will let me put the pull on easier. What I want to do is I'm just going to lay the zipper on to where I can see about 1/4 of an inch of the tape. So between the teeth and my binding will be about 1/4 of an inch. And that will let me top stitch right here at the top, 1/8 of an inch away from the top of this, to attach the zipper to this clear vinyl pocket. Super simple way to do it, and it's really neat. Now when you open this, you will see the back of the zipper tape. If that bothers you, you could definitely do just a traditional way of making a zipper where you fold down the vinyl. But it does not bother me at all. This will not fray. It's a finished edge, and I like this better than having the vinyl folded down and top stitched that way. I think this feels better if you reach your hand in there, and I just think it looks neater. So this is the way I do it. So first thing, we are going to top stitch all down this 1/8 of an inch down that bottom line. This just attaches the binding to the clear vinyl, so it won't be shifting around whenever we add that zipper. You could definitely use double-sided tape, glue, whatever you like to use in the sewing room. I just feel like it's easier for me and less hassle to just kind of sew it this way. I'm not a fan of using double-sided tape. Not only do I have a hard time getting it attached, I also have a hard time with my needle with it, and it just makes for a less enjoyable sewing experience. Whereas this way, I just kind of relax, go slow, and I don't have any problems. I'm shifting constantly to make sure that I'm seeing about 1/4 of an inch of my tape all the way down. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to do the same thing for the other clear vinyl piece, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. I want to explain how the next steps for this clear vinyl pocket will work. If you do not want a slip pocket, what you can do is you can just attach the clear vinyl with the zipper to the lining piece, and you won't have a slip pocket. It would just be attached all together. I might do a video on that way to do it. That's a quicker, easier way to do it. Use less material and things like that. But I like to have the slip pocket too, just for extra organization and storage. So the way I do it is I like both of my pockets. I'll have two. I'll have one at the top and one at the bottom with a space in between. I like for both of the edges to be just the clear vinyl. I have made them with the zipper at the top before, but I don't like it as much. Since I'm doing that way, since I'm having the clear vinyl at the top and my prints directional, it's going to look a little bit different than my other one. You can see that the zippers will meet in the middle and the prints will both be the right sides going down, but it'll be upside down whenever you're cutting it. So if you looked at it like this way, it would look like it was upside down. You could do it whichever way. I know I might be not explaining it well, but it'll make more sense as it comes together. But just make note of that if you're using directional fabric, and make sure you choose if you want both of your zippers at the top, or if you're okay doing it like I do it and have them both in the middle. But anyway, what I've done now is I cut out a piece of the cotton woven. No interfacing. And if you ask me what I measured it, I don't measure it. What I do is after I complete this piece, I take it and lay it on the cotton woven and I just trim around it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to baste along the top of this to attach, and then I'm also going to baste around the clear vinyl to attach it. I'm not basting the zipper teeth because I still do not have my pull on yet. If you wanted to add your pull and go ahead and do it, you could. I just don't like to do it. That's the way I do it. But what I'll do is go ahead and sew 1/8 of an inch around the top, the sides, and the bottom, but skipping the teeth part. After we do that, then we'll add another layer of binding, and then we're ready to put it to the lining and attach everything all together. To me, this is such a quick, fun pattern. And yes, I use it for templates, patterns, things like that, projects. I kind of get everything stored and organized. But I have made this for kids before, and I'm surprised at how much stuff, like how much toys and things kids could fit in here. I've made them for kids for like coloring books, crayons, pencils, things like that. but they will put like toys in here, so it's really interesting. Once I made it whenever I was going on a vacation and just put like some toiletries in there, and it fit really nice also. So even though this feels like it wouldn't hold a lot, it surprises me sometimes with how much it can hold. But and now that I have that all basted in place, what I do is I grab out my binding. Like I said, I cut my binding to 2.5 inches. That's a pretty wide binding. I just like the look of it. You could definitely cut it to 2 inches or even 1.25 inches, and it would be better on this next step. Let me show you what I mean. I add this binding here. I won't be able to push this raw edge all the way up against the bottom of this piping, or it would get in the way of the zipper teeth. So I have to have mine just a little bit lower and do my 2 rows of stitches there. It doesn't bother me, it's just fine, but you can see if I pushed it all the way up, it would definitely cover up those teeth. So I pull it back a little and just do my 2 rows of stitching that way, and I'm completely fine with it. This is the way I always do them. If you want, just know that you could do it differently. I wouldn't go lower than 1.25 inches. I think it would just be hard to kind of finagle it and maneuver around, but that's just a thought. You can try it and see how you like it and what you like. I want, whenever I'm placing this, it to look about the same. I want it symmetrical on both the top and the bottom. So I'm just top stitching 1/8 inch away from the folded edge. I'm going slow and making sure that I keep just 1/4 inch of the tape showing all the way down. This encases not only the raw edge of that zipper, but also let your slip pocket be completely attached, and so that you won't see any raw edges on it, and it'll look really nice and neat. Have that first row of stitching done. Now I'm going to come back and stitch again 1/8 inch away from the top, but this time, like I said, I'm not even sewing on the zipper tape. It's not up against this edge, so I'm really just doing a decorative stitch and kind of help securing a little bit that piece of binding. Okay, that is completely done. At this point, what I'm going to do is I will add my zipper pull on this one, and I'll finish up the other one, add my zipper pull on it too, and when I come back we will attach it to the lining. Then we'll attach those 2 pieces together and bind all around, and that's all there is to it. So now we're at the very end, so let's go through what I've done. This piece right here is the lining. I cut it the same size as this exterior. I didn't measure it, I just put the exterior on it and cut it. That's how I did it. So you'll want to make sure that you kind of push it flat, make sure everything's laying flat. And after I put the lining on, then I just came back and clipped a pocket on each end. I match up the ends and the sides. If you need to trim, you can trim now, or you can trim after you baste it all together. The thing you want to watch is that you don't have any puckering or bubbling right here in the middle. This spot can tend to get a little bubbly if you're not careful. You can also baste your lining exterior separate and then add your pockets, however you want to do it. Doesn't matter, your preference. This material is a cotton canvas. I don't have any interfacing on it, but you definitely could. Like if I run my fingers over here, I can feel that seam. If that bothers you, you can add a layer of cotton woven or something right here. Something else you'll want to do is when I put my zipper pulls on, I want my zipper pulls going the same way. You could have them going different ways if you wanted to, but that's the way I'm doing mine. Also, I make these, and for me, I don't have anything that closes these. So there won't be any snaps on mine. I will hang them so that the handles are together, and when I carry it, the handles are together. If you don't like that, I have made it before where I put snaps either here, magnetic snaps here below the binding. I do the riveted snaps, or I have bound the raw edge of this vinyl and moved it down so that it was an encased pocket right here, enclosed I should say maybe. And then I put my snaps here and then bound around it. I can do that in a different video if you want to see that step. If you're like, I really feel like this needs, you know, some kind of closure. You could also add ribbon to tie it. You could also make a flap. There's so many ways you could do it. This is just the way it works for me. The only other thing is that you will, like since we made this a slip pocket, it is open here. I'll baste down the sides, but this will be open. If you wanted, you could put a magnetic snap here to kind of keep that closed, or you don't have to have a slip pocket at all. If you didn't want a slip pocket, you would just top stitch this closed and it would not be a slip pocket, it would just be a zipper pocket. I've done that before too. So it's very versatile, just kind of doing this method. It's just basically a carrying pouch, case, whatever, and I just love making them. So I'm going to sew this from the lining side for this step. When I add the binding all around, I'll actually do it from the exterior side, but for this step I'm going to do it here. I definitely want to make sure I do not catch the handles in my seams whenever I'm sewing. So I'm going to push them down, and then I'm just going to sew all around here. No fancy steps or anything, 1/8 of an inch away. While I'm sewing, I'm making sure to apply a little bit of pressure so that I keep everything nice and flat and I don't have any kind of like bubbling happening. I will have to lift up the other side because it's kind of big and it'll be in the way here. If your machine has trouble with sewing over vinyl, there's definitely plenty of things you can do. A Teflon foot, Scotch tape on your foot, you could do parchment paper, so many different options. The camera stand is getting in the way of me sewing and is causing some bunching, so I am going to sew the rest of this off camera, but I'm just going to continue to sew around the perimeter with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I changed up my camera angle, so I'm going to try to do this next step all on camera, but if it starts hitting, then I'll stop again and just show you at least a little bit of it. But now what I've done is I've basted all around, so I just added binding. Now I did choose to use pre-made binding just because I'm a little lazy, and I just clipped it around. So you can see it's on the front and the lining, just clipped all the way around. I'm going to sew it from the exterior is the way I'm going to do it. I tried to make for sure that I wrapped it around evenly so it was even on both sides. So when I sew this with the seam allowance, and I'm just going to use, I'm going right up against the binding, and that's going to be 1/4 of an inch. So we'll go all the way around with 1/4 of an inch. I have the corners just kind of clipped together. So you see what you do is you just push them flat and get that mitered corner. I'll just move one of these clips there to hold that in place a little bit. But that's the way I'll do it. Now I have the raw edge folded under here, and I'm going to start sewing here to go ahead and connect that spot so that it stays stable. That'll be your trickiest spot when it comes to the binding, is just where it's connected and folded over, because you don't want that to be bunching or shifting. So I start by just back stitching, and then I slowly go around. I'll keep my finger here pushing to make sure the binding stays right up against the edge of the bag. Now when you come to this first corner, make sure everything is tucked in really nice, and go ahead and go over, and do not pivot until your needle is under both of the layers that are folded. That's when you can lift it up and turn it. Keep the needle down, of course. And my carrying tote is done. Now usually what I do is I'll usually put some clips around just to kind of compress everything, but really you don't need to. Whenever you hang it up, and over time it will kind of compress the way you want. But this is how it looks. Super cute, super simple. It is just a fun little bag to carry the things you need. So we have the 2 slip pockets here. For me, this is a great place to put like the paper pattern or pattern pieces, or if you have a ruler you want to carry, something a little bit larger that isn't small, tiny pieces. For the smaller pieces, you can definitely put them in here, templates, whatever. If you have your scissors, you'd want to put them in here. Lots of times I'll put fabric in the slip pocket because it'll kind of catch and there's no risk of it like coming out or falling out or things like that. So this is the way I do mine. You can see how easy this is, how quick it comes together, and how there's so many different ways you can customize it for you and whatever you need to carry around. So I hope that you enjoyed getting to see how I sew one of my favorite bags. I hope it inspires you. I hope it'll help you. I hope there's some way you can use this kind of, not really a pattern, but this technique or design or bag in your own sewing room. And if you have any questions about the way this comes together, any concerns or anything you'd like to see me do differently, please let me know in the comments. And I want to thank you again for watching one of my tutorials. And I hope today you're able to just sew something that helps you and that you just kind of do whatever you want in the sewing room and design your own things and make a bag specific to your needs. Thanks so much and have a great day.